Let's dive into thinking about legal education and how you all are thinking about it. It's very hard. I find it very hard thinking about people who are coming into law school today in fall of 2025, what they'll need to practice in 3 years from now, because the technology is changing so quickly and because legal education, we all know, does not change as quickly by design. So from your perspective, what do you think every law student should need to know about AI, regardless of how the technology changes over the next 3 years when they step into practice? And Dyane, maybe we can start with you on this one and then hear from Jonah.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So much, but I'll caveat that as there's not time for all of it, right? We could redesign the entire 3 years of law school to focus on Gen AI, but even saying that out loud, no, of course we shouldn't do that. There's a lot of reasons we should redesign law school in different ways, but I don't know that it's all for Gen AI. Um, one thing I think is a healthy dash of humility. So it's changed each year now. Even with these students, the fresh crop of the last few weeks, students are more and more experienced with these tools now coming in, right? Compared to even just a few years ago. But what I think every law student should know is that using these tools in their personal world, which is terrific, and as we've talked about, a great way to play and learn and get comfortable, is still not using them in legal workflows. So I think, what every student needs to know is a healthy dose of, I'm not a lawyer yet. I haven't experienced legal workflows. I don't understand, kind of how things work yet. And so kind of, again, a healthy skepticism or patience, if you will, of how they're going to use them as lawyers. If I can offer another one, I also think that students need to have a question set. I have been so surprised to hear my students come back to me after internships and externships and jobs telling me that they're either told nothing about use of AI, they have kind of a one little policy that is pretty unclear about what they can use and when, or some that are getting great direction and training. So I tell my students, so much is going to change. At least have, 4 or 5 questions that no matter when you leave this building in any work environment, clerkship setting, you ask, what am I using? What am I allowed to, and know the lay of the land. So I think, we can talk about prompting skills and all those things about students of today, but to me, those are kind of the basics of the humility to know that you need a legal skill set to use these legal tools, and also kind of know enough to ask what you don't know and figure out kind of where you're going and what they're comfortable with. Because as we all know, that is a huge varied landscape right now, and I think will be for a while.
First of all, I would agree with everything Dyane said. I think being able to have a question set is probably the most important skill that we can give our students going forward. What I would add or rephrase or think about in a slightly different way is, on the one hand, I think nothing should change about law school, right? And that's sort of an extreme version of what I mean to say. But actually, I think, going back to, well, what do you learn as a law student, right? I often say on my podcast that one of the best parts about getting a JD is you can do anything with it. And one of the most challenging parts about getting a JD is you can do anything with it. By definition, we are training individuals to do lots of different things in a 3-year period in a very sort of confined time and energy and space. One thing we try to give law students in their 3 years is we change the way they think, the way they read, the way they act, the way they understand the world. That part shouldn't change. That is going to, in my view, be even more important in sort of a AI enhanced legal world, because that's what differentiates us. It's our judgment, it's our strategy, it's our history, it's our reasoning. Those things, we have a way of teaching them. Now, I agree with Dyane. I don't think we're always doing the best job at teaching them, and there are ways to change our legal pedagogy. But ultimately, the ability to think like a lawyer is going to become, I think, more important, not less important, in an AI enhanced world. At the same time, what it means to sort of act like a lawyer is changing much more rapidly than maybe it did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And because of that, I don't think we should even have the goal of teaching every law student to be able to explain AI as it exists today. I think that's a good goal to be able to sort of have those next level conversations. Instead, I think what we need to do is give them the meta skills of, how do I deal with a brand new tool? right? How do I deal with a tool that by definition didn't exist when I went to law school? That's what the model rules of professional conduct, I think, are going to require of future lawyers. And it's what future legal employers are going to require of future lawyers. So on the one hand, it's keep learning to think like a lawyer. And on the other hand, it's giving people skills and techniques to sort of handle the brave new world that by definition will always be braver and newer the second they get into it.
Jonah, that reminds me of something our dean at Suffolk Law School always used to say when he started the first innovation technology kind of collection of classes over a decade ago, that it was teaching a new kind of issue spotting. That up until then, law school was always about spotting substantive black letter law issues. And his point in terms of modern legal practice skills is a new type of issue spotting is, where can I spot new efficiencies here? Where can I find new ways to do this in a more efficient, effective way that saves my, client money or time or improves my workflow? And that reminds me of what Jonah said in terms of the meta skill to approach a workflow. Plenty of our students, frankly, are still struggling with using Word and Excel and all sorts of other tools. So I agree with Jonah that, our role as educators is maybe to plant the seed in a little bit tool agnostic way. Because we don't know even today, what our students are going to be using, much less in, 3 or 4 years.
That's all super interesting. And it does sound like you all agree an awful lot. It sounds like we have a lot of alignment in this particular conversation about what the role law schools should play is in a sort of rapidly changing technological world. And it feels totally right to me that unless our students have the background kind of legal architecture and understand, what is public law, what is private law, what are the sources of law, where do I go find the sources of law to make sure they're correct, the tools are not that useful to somebody who's going to use them as a lawyer, right? So law schools are going to continue to have this fundamental pedagogical mission that in some ways is unchanged and, will be unchanged no matter what the technology does. On the other hand, I think, Jen's question was kind of focused on how lawyers practice their craft. And it clearly is not going to look in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years like it does today, right? So, and law schools have some obligation to make sure that their students are practice ready, whatever that means. I know there's lots of debate about what that means.